This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1104, a conversation with Judd Winick, creator commentary on Green Arrow.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. This is episode 1104. It's a conversation with Judd Winick, creator commentary on Green Arrow. It was very exciting to have Judd back on the show. He's been a great friend of the show in the past, and this time we talk very specifically about his Green Arrow run from the mid-2000s. I kind of mentioned in the interview, I came to it a little bit late. I came to it initially when he was paired with Scott McDaniel during the 1 year later, but he'd already been writing the book for a few years at that point. So recently I had the opportunity to go back using the DC Infinite app, thank you DC Infinite app, and being able to reread his Green Arrow run from the beginning. And it is just such a fantastic run, great characterization, some really great storytelling, especially when working with Phil Hester. It's interesting that you can kind of break it down into three different eras. You have the, kind of the initial era leading up to 1 year later, then the series kind of pivots, and then it pivots again when Green Arrow and Black Canary are getting married. So this was a really tremendous conversation. It's always a pleasure to have Judd on the show. Usually he stops by in February to talk about the newest Hilo release, but this year it was a tremendous pleasure to be able to have him come back on for a summer episode and to talk about Green Arrow. So this was just a lot of fun. If you want to check out Judd's prior appearances on the show, you can check out episode, now you're ready, but there's a lot of them, episode 554, 666, 668, 764, 788, 854, 946, 1019 and 1031, as well as 1081. So again, he has made so many appearances. This was his 11th. It was always a tremendous pleasure to have him back on the show. So I hope you're really going to enjoy this episode. Next week, we're going to have another creator commentary. So not creator commentary, sorry, a creator spotlight. Trying to do something a little bit different. Last month we did Peter David. We're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm really excited to have that episode. I'm actually recording it in a few days as we speak. The next interview episode after that is going to be Danny Kazam, who is an associate editor at Marvel Comics. He has been working on a lot of great projects over at Marvel. Specifically, he's the one who's really been bringing J.M. DeMatteis back into the fold to write a sort of different miniseries at Marvel, specifically on Spider-Man. So I was really excited to talk to Danny. It felt like I got a kindred spirit in terms of some eras of Spider-Man's history that we both particularly enjoy and kind of grew up with. So it was a tremendous conversation. Cannot wait to share that with you guys in a few weeks. And then we're going to have a Book of the Month Club, which I believe we're going to be returning to the Spider-Man Clone Saga for this month. And then if we do talk about the Clone Saga, it's going to be talking about a storyline called The Exile Returns. Sorry, no, not Exile Returns. Can't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's called Exiled. But also we're going to be talking about the Lost Years. And then the episode after that, hopefully we're going to have an episode with Chuck Austin coming back to talk about some of his Superman work, specific on the Metropolis book in the early 2000s. And hopefully in September, we're also going to have a new episode with Ron Friends. So a lot of really great stuff in the coming. And I hope that you stick with us and make sure to subscribe to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. Listen to us on every device, and thank you so much, and you can always email me at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Anyways, you're tired of hearing me prattle on for 3.5 minutes? Let's jump right into the conversation with Judd Winick. Enjoy. Judd, welcome back to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. How are you today?
I'm excellent, sir. It is good to be with you once again.
It's funny, obviously we're an audio medium and people can't see us, but it's interesting. This is the first time we've ever actually spoken seeing each other visually, because we've always done Skype audio only, and I was always very I always kept everything audio. So this is actually the first time you and I have actually talked face to face, which is kind of funny after all these years.
It is. I mean, it's one of the. I mean, in sort of the post-pandemic, leaning heavily into Zoom life that we have now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I forget it was actually someone who'd mentioned a ways back, like, we don't have to do some things can be handled in a phone call. We don't have to Zoom at all. But this is nicer. This feels more like a conversation this way. I appreciate this.
Absolutely. So I had you come back because we talked last time you were on when we were talking about the newest Hilo book about having you come back to talk about, your Green Arrow run. Because we've talked about Green Lantern with you before. We talked about Exiles, but we haven't really zeroed in on Green Arrow. Although I think at one point we talked a little bit about the 1 year later stuff, but we hadn't really gone back to the beginning. So obviously this is 22 years ago, so memories can be hazy. But I'm curious,
yes.
What can you tell me about the process of getting on Green Arrow? Like at this point, you had done Green Lantern for a pretty sustained run. You were about to do Graduation Day. There's all sorts of stuff you were doing. You're still doing Exiles, and now here comes Green Arrow. And obviously, Brad, your good friend Brad Meltzer had just done the Archer's Quest. So, what led you to Green Arrow?
Well, this part of the story is very, very fresh in my mind. But I will admit that I wrote Green Arrow for 5 years, so some of it might get a little murky here and there. This part fresh in my mind because this was still kind of the beginning for me in a lot of ways. I had done a lot at this point. I had already written, as you said, I'd written Green Lantern for a number of years. I had been working on the Adventures of Barry Wayne Boy Genius. I'd already done Pedro and Me, which is my graphic novel, and I'd worked very, very closely with my friend and professional rabbi, Bob Schreck, who was my editor on Green Lantern. And he actually came to me not long into Kevin Smith's run. Like I think Kevin Smith might have gone about a year. I think. I could be wrong. I can't quite remember. But as Kevin was sort of coming towards the end, Bob reached out to me and said, like, okay, so here's the thing, Green Arrow. I would like you to take over Green Arrow. And I was like, great. He said, but not after Kevin Smith. Like, okay. He's like, because they're gonna kill you. It's like, really? He's like, yeah. I sort of feel like the way the readership is now that Kevin, I said, yeah, I say it came in, we're discussing the obvious. Kevin's run was like really huge. And Kevin came in as an outsider, and Bob just said, I kind of feel like we need someone in between, like another mystery meat. Someone who's not really like just a regular straight up superhero comic book writer like yourself. And that's when he told me, he's like, I'm thinking of asking your buddy Brad. I think I'm asking Brad Meltzer, do you think he'd be into it? And I said, Bob, I think Brad's been waiting his entire life for someone to ask him, does he want to write Green Arrow? He said, okay, good. I thought so. He said, but when he said, I think Brad's probably going to do like, a limited run as well. But when he's done, I want you to come on board. I said, okay, that's fine with me, man. So for those playing at home, Brad Meltzer, who is a novelist, children's book author, sometime television host, rock on tour, and probably at this point we can call him an influencer because it would annoy him. But most importantly, this conversation, Brad was my college roommate and been one of my closest friends for, I think we're going on 35 years at this point. Brad and I communicate, maybe every day. By text, less phone calls because, we're adult humans who live in the world, so we text all the time. Anyway, so this was fun for me and for us. So Brad had his run, and I, got every piece of that, including like advanced scripts before they came out and pencils and things like that. So I felt very, very close to his run. The idea being that Brad was going to do his thing, and when he was done, I was going to do mine. And it was helpful because I knew ahead of time that I had like a year or so before I had to start actually working on it, and I knew what Brad was doing. So I got to think about it, which is the advice I always give to anyone who's talking about becoming a storyteller or a writer, that I don't say to sit around and wait for the muse to hit. But I do advise them that do whatever you can, that when you sit down to start your writing, that it's been living in your head for some time, that you've worked out a lot of it before you get in there. Don't look at the blank page and just try to dive in there and do it. So I was, it was fortuitous that I had this time in my hands, that I could think about it before I got in there. And knowing full well, like Brad told me his whole story. Like, okay, so this is where Oliver Queen's going to end up. That's where I get to pick it up. All right, that's where I'm going to start. So that's how it happened. So from Kevin to my buddy Brad, and then off to me. And luckily for me, that all that transition with my co-storytellers, Phil Hester and Andy Parks, they were staying on board. Mm-hmm. And for those playing at home, I mean the artists. Phil Hester was the penciler and Andy Parks was the anchor. They started on Kevin Smith's run, through Brad's run, and then into mine. So it provided an enormous amount of continuity.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like, when you do get to kind of live with it for as long as you kind of did, because you knew you had a lot of runway before you got to start, which seems such a luxury in comics, right? Because comics are such a pedal to the metal, like there's a deadline already due, and now you have a lot more time. Did you kind of create for yourself kind of a series Bible on what you wanted it to look like? Did you do a lot of long-range planning just because you had time to sit with it, which is, again, not a typical position? And at this point, you would have known that because you're writing Green Lantern, you're hitting deadlines, and now suddenly you have this much time. What was that, a luxury? Was it almost a burden of luxury because you have so much time to think about it?
No, I think it was a good thing. It allowed me to, truly, the longer, the longer you hold the sneeze, the bigger it's going to be at the end there. So the longer I got to dwell on it, and that's what you got to do. I think at the time I was writing Exiles, I was writing Green Lantern, and I think I was doing Barry Ween. I think I was juggling those three, happily juggling those three. And so to occupy another spot in my head was thinking about Green Arrow. And I had an idea for story. I had an idea what some of the beats would be, some of the twists would be, where I sort of would land on a certain story arc. I always wrote towards a story arc that we're going to do like 6 issues and we're going to land here, then pick up a new story. So this gave me time to really marinate on it. And, it was a luxury. You do this thing where you're living your life and you're in your car and thinking about Green Arrow, or you're exercising and you're thinking about Green Arrow. You're in the shower, you're thinking about Green Arrow, and just toying around with the ideas and trying them on until you finally get to execute them. And it's fun. Changes were made, before I even started. That's cool. I had quite a while to think about it.
What I really appreciated about your run, so I've been rereading it in the last couple of days, and I'm reading like 24 issues at a time, and it's a lot to take in, but I got to say, it's a really smooth read. You really do glide from story to story, but what I really appreciated, and again, I don't know if I would really call myself a huge Green Arrow fan. I remember buying Kevin Smith's run because it was huge. And then I think I was there for the first year. I think it was a year and a half actually that he was on. And then kind of coming in here and there to check out to Ollie. I remember I kind of missed the bulk of your run when it was happening. I regret it now. But I got to experience it kind of afterwards in trades. What really brought me back to you was when you had Scott McDaniel join you for 1 year later, which hit like an atomic bomb. Like that just felt like, oh my God, what is this? And I went back and devoured your entire run. You really felt like you built up the universe of Green Arrow in a way that I didn't almost know was possible, because he's a character who without your run, I don't know if I think of him as having as established kind of a supporting cast. The fact that you use the mayor, the friendly mayor, although you eventually murder him, the friendly mayor to GA was kind of a cool twist, because, we've seen that in Gotham, but it was kind of nice to see Green Arrow working with someone. You really developed Mia a lot more and had her develop in the Speedy. So I really appreciate how much groundwork you kind of laid in your run to really build up the world and the team that was, Green Arrow and his family.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It was a long run, and I think that's why I got to do that. I think that's why it feels so smooth, is because it was my mainstay. It was the story that I was going to keep telling. And at the times when I thought I would finish up my run, that okay, I think I'm coming to the end of the rope here. Not that I'm burnt out or anything like that, but just I think it's becoming a little bit more challenging to get where I need to go and to tell stories that feel right. Something would happen, and that something would happen would usually be Dan DiDio. Dan would be, he would turn the apple cart over, and suddenly we're doing 1 year later. And suddenly I'm just re-energized. I've got okay. What if we do? It's like, what if Oliver Queen's the mayor? And that alone was like, that's 12 issues right there in my head. Like, I got a lot to do now. That's fun. It's fun. And then again, we're sort of coming to the end of it then. Dan and Bob kick it around. They're like, what if they get married? What if Green Arrow and Black Canary get married? And we relaunched the series as Green Arrow and Black Canary. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. You know, it's like, let's do that. I have to give Dan and Bob credit for how smooth and how much I did on the character, because they set up these very interesting pivots, which wound up not being tough pivots, which managed to be welcoming. I never felt torpedoed by anything we were doing. It was just good timing that when it happened, I was sort of feeling like the plane needs to come in for a landing pretty soon. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not seeing the runway. It's not time to get off yet. But, you know, we're putting our stuff back in the overhead compartments, and you know, we're kind of getting there. And then it would be like, hey, we're gonna do this 1 year later thing. It's like, okay, yeah, that'll be cool. That'll be interesting.
It's interesting because, I mean, it basically makes you sound like the consummate team player. Like, you're, like, again, the whole benefit of, in theory, of working on Big Two is that you get to play with the toys, right? But obviously, with the toys come sometimes editorially mandated things that are going to happen in the broad scheme. And it sounds like you had a very healthy attitude about it, and kind of took that and ran with it instead of feeling like it railroaded you, instead of feeling like, oh, this is just giving me new fuel for the fire.
Well, it's very astute. Yeah, I was a team player. I was very very tight with Bob Schreck. Bob and I were friends before he became my editor, and Dan DiDio and I got along famously. And when he was coming up with any of his big ideas, myself, Jeff Johns, were always among his first calls to bounce the idea off him, off us, and maybe even throw some things into the hat. Like 1 year later, when he threw it to me and Jeff, we threw back our ideas for our monthlies, what we thought we could do, and had ideas pretty quickly. And that was actually fueled Dan to say, like, oh, okay, you know what, we could do this. This will work. So we were his utility players in that way. And I'd have to think really hard about, were there any big upheavals across all the titles that really knocked my hat off at all. And probably not in a big way. I always found it a little more, well, I've always had a theory about folks who can generate work from nothing and those who need an assignment. I always make this, I might even spoken to you about this. It's a metaphor I bring up, or analogy I bring up all the time. Believe it or not, it's from Project Runway. So Project Runway, with the reality game show where they make dresses. So, you know, fashion folks who make dresses. I think back to one particular season. There was a young man who was on the show and just killed it. Was great through the entire season. Was always, you know, they'd give him this assignment. He'd come up with a dress. He'd come up with a look. It'd be great. And then when it came to the fashion show at the end, he just shat the bed. He just did very, very poorly. And that was because he was left completely to his own devices and not being given an assignment, not given something to do. It seemed like he had too many choices, and it didn't work for him. Now, again, I don't find myself to be a person who gets stymied when you have nothing. But when you work in superhero comics and you're working with somebody else's toys, which is you can only make these characters go from like A to C. They can't evolve too much because they can't die, they can't grow old. There's many, many things they can't do. So you have to work with them what they can. Sometimes being given an assignment kind of frees you up by putting you in a box, by saying you got to do it this way. Okay, then I got to figure out how to do it that way. And you have to get creative in that way. And a lot of that happened for me during Green Arrow.
Interesting. It's interesting because it feels like you kind of broke out of the box with Green Arrow in some ways, I would say, because it did feel like you were able to bend him more. And again, this is probably because he's not always considered maybe A-list DC, although I would say that's not always fair. But I think you can probably bend a character like Green Arrow further and be able to do more things with him. And it did feel like you were able to do that. And again, part of that's with having the kind of Arrow family and being able to have him be like this broken father figure, and like seeing, and this is what I really responded to, is seeing his relationship with Mia develop and her being so like I want to do this, and him just shutting her down constantly, and then having that moment where she has to kill someone, is put into such a position, is a harrowing moment. And it's really, you really do a great job of showing both sides. That Mia's like, yeah, that happened, but also I was already moving this way. I'm not the kid you think I am. And he just wants to protect this kind of image that he's projecting on her, but that's not who she is. And eventually letting her become Speedy and becoming, I do like that once you kind of let him have that moment where he's like, okay, you can do this, that he's pushing her into the Titans. Like, if you're going to do this, you're going to learn with the other kids. Like, I really liked how, which does feel like what a father figure would do once you finally relent to something. You're like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, very astute. You're right that you get a lot more room to move with Green Arrow, opposed to Batman. Like, if you're doing Batman, there's only so many things they're going to let you do with Batman, or even Robin. Putting Robin in the same stories that we put Mia, Dearden, and Speedy into, they wouldn't let us. I don't know. I don't know, really, actually. I think it would be a much more uphill battle, even with the folks who really were on board with everything. Like, could Robin test HIV positive? Could he be living with HIV? I don't know. But even little things, I had a storyline once where the Batmobile gets stolen. There was a large part of the storyline, the Batmobile gets stolen, and the whole idea got shit canned. They said, it makes Batman look like such a chump. We can't do that. And I thought, like, that's pretty small potatoes. It's the Batmobile. It makes for a good story. I was like, no. Whereas, with Green Arrow, because I think you could say the stakes are lower or people are less invested, you get to have these character moments. I had him fail a lot. He was a very flawed character who made a lot of personal mistakes, who got his head kicked in his personal life, his family life, a lot. It was very, very hard. It was very challenging for him, and much more emotive than Batman. Much more someone who admitted being a father figure, who wanted to be a father figure, wanted to be a better man, and had those issues and debates with himself and how to juggle being this superhero, which he absolutely has to be, and trying to be someone who navigates the way in the world with this chosen family, which slowly happened. It didn't quite happen right away. It happened bit by bit. That became the Arrow family. And I'm pleased that it's been a number of years since I worked on the book. I know that the Arrow family is actually kind of the mainstay now. That the characters within the book are very much like sort of like the Bat family. And in the Bat family, they're just barely family. They don't really get along like that. There's not a lot of love going on there as being discussed, which is, I believe, the Arrow family, they care about each other more right there on top, right there on the surface. And that's interesting. You don't often get that in superhero comics, and I'm pleased and proud that it's still existing in that way.
It's interesting you talk about Ollie. Like, you both showed him as flawed, but what I really appreciated was how you had him really recognize all of his flaws. Like, he's talking about how, he's so fast and always moving forward. That's great as a superhero, bad as a partner, as a romantic partner. Like, he doesn't always stop. And when you have him cheat on Dinah and then she's confronting him about it, I really loved how sophisticated that moment was, because she's giving him kind of the out. She's like, I basically saying, like, I know you did something. I know this is the moment that you could confess, and he won't do it. And then later when he's talking to me about it, he's like, there is no point in me doing that. It's only to assuage my own guilt. It's only going to hurt her, which is, again, another sense of emotional intelligence that you infused into this character, because you see him do the bad thing. You're like, oh, Ollie. And then you're like, well, that's why he's not confessing it. That does make sense. It's still bad, but you can understand why the character does that. And again, it infuses him with a high degree of emotional intelligence that you don't always expect to get from a comic book. Right.
Thank you. And that's what I was going for. And it's also, it's a little bit gray. It's not exactly, it's a lot of times I would make the choice of putting Oliver Queen in that very place. That he has you can call it an affair, but he and Diana, Black Canary, they're supposed to be together. They're a couple. They love each other. He came back from the dead, and come on, they're bonded. They are a couple. They are together, and he goes and cheats on her. And he knows why he cheated on her, because he's weak, because he's dumb, because he wasn't thinking. He's far too spontaneous. And he's also kind of right that if he tells her that it's all going to go to shit and it's bad, and you sort of understand that, but at the same time you think, yeah, but I think you still kind of suck, and you're kind of scared, right? You just don't want to get into it. You're justifying not telling her. You're justifying, like, you get to live the lie. And that was somewhat unspoken, or maybe having spoken at some point that someone's pointed it out to him, like, you're full of crap. You just want it easy. And you think you're being noble. And some people didn't respond to that. I did it a lot. I did a lot where Ollie would kind of have it both ways. And what I try to avoid is that he never fell back on, hey, look, this is just me. You know, this is who I am. Love it or leave it. You know, I can't help it. Blah blah. Like he always acknowledged his faults and tried to be better, and sometimes he wasn't. Again, it's like the pleasure of getting to write a character as long as you do. It gets to be nuanced, and I liked that about him and them and all of them. I think sometimes people would misunderstand my point of view, my opinions, and my passions because of what the characters did. It's like, well, yeah, Mia probably shouldn't have said that. Dinah probably shouldn't have said that. Ollie shouldn't have said that. I don't believe that crap. You know, I'm the omniscient narrator God here. I'm putting the words in their mouth, like, because I think it makes for a more interesting story as a character. I don't think they're right. Most of, they did so many wrong things, low-key wrong things. And also lost to a lot of villains. Yes. I have them get beat up a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm curious about the Dinah of it all, because it's interesting. Black Canary and Green Arrow are together at that point, but you don't really use her much in the book. And so she kind of flitters in and out. Obviously, she's working with the Birds of Prey at that point. So I'm curious, was that a very conscious decision of kind of keeping her at arm's length? Was that an editorial decision because she was being used in Birds of Prey, and then it just kind of work out that you kind of said, okay, I'm going to make the best of that kind of situation and kind of play off of the fact that she's not in the book as much? Or what was that kind of thought process like in terms of not having Black Canary as much involved at the beginning of your run?
It was a little bit of both, that she's not in there a lot. It's a little bit, this was a time where we were being really tight about the continuity month to month. What no one wanted was, okay, good example. I was writing Batman and I wanted Nightwing in there, and they said, oh, you can't, he broke his leg. It's like, what? It's like, okay, well, we'll just pretend it's a couple of months apart. No, he's actively in the Nightwing monthly. He has a hurt leg. And everyone argues about, like, he's Nightwing. Why is his leg hurt? Why are you doing this? How does that make it interesting to have Dick Grayson limp around for a couple of months? What are you doing? So I had to argue the point, like, fine, can we put a brace on his leg and we'll make comment on it or something so I can put, forgive me, F and Nightwing in the Batman book? It's Batman, for Christ's sake. I get to use him, right? So things were, like, a little ridiculous like that. And, Black Canary was in Birds of Prey, and a very intense book as well. So there was about being careful. Like, she's going to do this. Is that cool? Like, yeah, it should be fine. So I couldn't move her around too much. I couldn't have her do too much, or have things happen to her that might, in some way, reflect what was going on in Birds of Prey. Got to watch that a little bit. Didn't want to step on anyone else's toes. But again, it also allowed me to, like, I wasn't doing a team book. I wasn't doing it about the two of them. She was going to be in there here and there, and she was. Initially, I just wanted to concentrate on Oliver Queen. I wanted to concentrate on Green Arrow. And then later, their relationship sort of played a more interesting part. And it also sort of helped the story and getting really specific, getting that, Ollie had a fling. And it was easier for him to have a fling because Black Canary wasn't around very much. He sort of felt the absence. It wasn't sort of weighing on. I think as readers we had a hard time that if they were, like, in the same house, if they woke up together, if they did whatever, and then Ollie went and ran around, it would have seemed odd. So it was a little bit fortuitous because it allowed me just to have him do his thing, but at the same time it's one of those boxes. They put you in a box. You got to be careful not to do too much because Gail's over there doing Bird's Prey. I don't want to step on Gail's toes, and which was fun. And that was just what we did back then.
Absolutely. Now, in your run at the beginning, as you said, I think for the first, year and a half, if not longer, you're working with Phil Hester and Andy Parks, and you guys really felt like a really gelled team. What was working together like, and how much interaction did you have with Phil to kind of develop certain ideas or tailor your script to his pencils? I mean, it obviously would have helped that you already got to see a lot of Green Arrow by Phil Hester and Andy Parks because they've been doing the art on Kevin Smith's run and then Brad's run. So as you said, for the reader, it established continuity and an ongoing kind of visual style. But for you, did it also give you an easier shorthand when you start writing for them because you've already seen what they can do on this particular character?
Yeah, it was a very, very important piece of the puzzle as a storyteller, knowing that the same art team was going to carry over, because it didn't always happen that way. There was a lot of clean slating when when a writer would come on. They would always it was routinely done that you'd bring on a new artist.
Yeah.
More than half the time, I sort of remember. And having Phil and Andy in there was very important. And also Bob knew that. Bob knew that we started with Kevin. It was a very big deal. Brad made a huge splash with Green Arrow. People loved it. Loved it. It was a very strong run. And for me to come in there and have new art, they would have beaten me up and taken my lunch money for sure. So Bob was instrumental in just making sure that Phil and Andy were happy. And they were. And we worked really well together. They're really terrific storytellers. Just strong. They really know the craft and know how to do it. And they're very good with the character. I think I'm laughing. A couple small things here and there. I made a point of. I think we made a point of losing the cap a little bit, a lot during a chunk of my run. I know Phil was just sick of drawing Ollie's stupid Robin Hood hat. I think he just didn't enjoy it after a while. So I think we ditched it quite a bit, I think. But they were really, really solid. And the way I write my scripts, I write them to the penciler, basically. Literally, talking directly to them. I mean, that's how Bob taught me back in the day, that when you write a script, you're writing a letter to the penciler. Tell them how you feel and what you want and what you want it to look like. And that's what you want. You want to communicate the story to them. And that was very easy with Phil because he's really, he's just good. He's just really, really good and amenable and interesting and has his own thoughts. And when we would come up with characters, it was a co-creation sort of thing. That I had an idea in my head of what I wanted them to look like. I'd give it to Phil, and Phil would not do it by rote. It wouldn't be exactly what I told him. It would be a version of what I told him, and I think every case was better because he was the visual artist. I mean, I draw, of course, but this is different. He'd always managed to make it just that much more interesting. So having two of them on there was just integral to making the story just flow. It was great. It was great. I loved working with them. I loved it.
Was it hard then? Because after that, you have about a year, roughly, until 1 year later happens and you have Scott McDaniel coming on and it has a different style and visual energy. So in the meantime, you have Tom Fowler and a few other artists. I think Ron Garney does a few issues. Was that difficult? Not because they're not good artists, but just because you had such an easy shorthand with Phil and Andy, and now you have a different visual style that you're having to tailor your stories to. And there's also, they're on for a couple issues, then you get a new artist and having to constantly juggle. Was that challenging and difficult to kind of keep your narrative energy up?
No, because in all cases they were really solid. Again, a lot of that has to do with Bob. He wasn't going to give me someone. Jesus. He wasn't going to pair me up with someone to tell the story who didn't have this stuff. I will say this: Bob has a very unique talent of finding talent, and he always did. In this case, because Green Arrow, and I think because it was a continuing story in the way we were doing it, and also particularly because coming off such a long run with Phil and Andy. He really wanted a couple of gunslingers in there who knew what they were doing and how to do it, and who knew who were really great storytellers as well. So it was different. I don't want to be so disingenuous that I won't lie to you. When I got the pages back with a new artist, it's a little hard because in my mind, because I'd written the stories for Phil and Andy for so long, I expected to look a certain way, and I'm writing and I still see it with those characters drawn that way, and then they're coming back differently now, and that was a bit of an adjustment. But they were solid's the wrong word. They were both also stylized and had their own look and feel and energy and dynamics that made it interesting in a different way. In both cases, getting a little energized. Not to take away from Phil and Andy, but sort of like, oh, okay, I can. This is just a new bike to ride, and this bike does different things. Not better tricks, just new tricks. And let me just lean into some of the new tricks here. I'm not going to get specific, but there was things that each of the artists could bring to the table differently, and I would try to lean in on those. How one crafts this, and one can do this. One could definitely deliver the goods this way, in a stronger way than happened here. And so it is that thing about doing comic books. It's a collaboration in the greatest way. I've always found that. I don't know if I know. I didn't spend a whole lot of time getting on the phone and kicking things back and forth with the artists on the book, because I always felt we talked through the scripts, and when they had questions, the questions came back to me, and that was the back and forth. But initially, okay, this is what I got. Okay, and here we'll do this, we'll do that, and that's always felt like it. Always felt we, not me. Because part of that might have to do with the fact that I draw. Yeah. And I don't see it as, my script, their art. It's like, no, it's our story, as Pollyanna as that might sound.
In the back half of the second year, as you're kind of around issue 50 and then the lead up to, I guess, 60 and the 1 year later, it did feel like the Green Arrow book started to feel more integrated into the DC continuity of the time. I don't mean this in a bad way, it felt like you were kind of building your own little village in Green Arrow for a while, doing your own thing. That's fantastic. And then suddenly it's being thrust into the main narrative of the DC universe at the time. You're bringing in Dr. Light and making that a really big faction. Obviously that builds off of Green Arrow and Dr. Light having Green Arrow and Deathstroke have a moment in Identity Crisis by Brad Meltzer, and then now you have Deathstroke's not so happy about Ollie, so he's kind of steering Dr. Light's way. So you have all this stuff that's more entrenched, and you also, at the same time, you're writing Outsiders, so obviously you're building up to Infinite Crisis there. Was it a lot of fun to be able to kind of start paying off and bringing Ollie more into the grander DC universe, and having these big narrative beats that are happening start to reverberate through the Green Arrow book itself?
Yeah, this was one of the benefits of being one of the writers on the inside. So for a number of years, I was one of the architects on a lot of the big crossover events. Me, Jeff Johns, Greg Rucka, and Dan DiDio, our big boss, leading the charge there, and some others floating in and out. Because of that, there was, I wouldn't say we get favorite nation status, but we're in the kitchen, making the big meals. So when we're in the kitchen making the big meals, me and Jeff and Greg get to think about what we get to do with our individual books, when we get up to the buffet. Like, we know what's going on there, so, we have time to kick it around. So, of course, Green Arrow gets to play with all the big toys and all the big crossover events, because I'm one of the people who made up the buffet of the crossover events. So a lot of that had to do with just more time to think about it and more time to plan it, opposed to a lot of the storytellers, the folks who are writing the other monthlies, who we then say, okay, this is what we're doing with the crossover event. Then they find out about it, and we explain it to them and give it to them, and then they have to go to their corners and figure it out. We always had to jump on them and had time to just, marinate on it more. And do things like play around with the big toys. Like, stop doing something like, I want Deathstroke in it for a few issues. Like, okay, cool. Well, I'll have Deathstroke here, and I'll do this, and he'll wind up here, and I'll end there. Then he'll go over to Teen Titans and do this and that and blah blah blah. And Greg's working over here with Batman and Checkmate and we got to do that. So that was a fun and exciting time because we're contacting each other all the time. We're bouncing ideas off each other all the time. Sometimes making changes, sometimes adding to each other's books, sometimes handing stuff off, and that made it fun. I was really pleased when we were sort of coming out of it. When I was in the middle of it, I wasn't thinking about it. When we were coming out of a lot of my run on Green Arrow, just that, how integral he became to the DCU, how important part he became in the DCU. He was someone who was sort of there. He didn't even quite have the stature of Green Lantern that much. But I felt like, based on the years we put in and the time we put in, that he sort of, that he found a slot. He found an important space within all the other heroes, who he represents and what he could be. Not the poor man's Batman anymore. We're not doing that. It's different. He's different.
It's interesting that the last issue of Green Arrow before 1 Year Later, and I think also the last issue, I guess, of Batman right before 1 Year Later, both kind of end in a similar note, only that there's like an explosions happening nearby. And you have Green Arrow watching his city get detonated. All these buildings are being bombed. You have Batman, I guess, because I think he can see Bloodhaven getting nuked by chemo in the distance, right? So you're ending both on these big climactic cliffhangers, and then obviously everything just kind of jumps forward. Was there any hesitation, or was it just more fun to be able to kind of end it on such a big, kind of what the hell is going to happen next moment, and then knowing you could just get the jump forward?
Both. One was, in one case, in Green Arrow, we're blowing up the city. There's big explosions all over the city, which is, devastating. And then I find out later, oh no, Bloodhaven's going to blow up. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, and you got to put that in your book too. It's like, oh, we're going to love explosions. Oh, okay. Well, and it's like, sort of like, fuck it. Everything's blowing up. That's what we're going to do. We're going to blow it all up, figuratively and literally, and then we're going to pick it up a month later with 1 year later. Fine, the hell with it. I did have a moment there like, there's a lot of blowing up going on. Oh, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. We're just doing it. We're doing it. And it won't matter because we're going to jump to the 1 year later and things have been rebuilt or cooled off or whatever the hell we're going to do.
Which one do you think, as a writer, was most satisfying to have happen? Given that there's a similarity, but obviously they hit the characters a little bit differently. So which one do you think was more maybe impactful to the character in that moment? In terms of the cliffhanger endings?
I'd say for me, the 1 year later jump. I have a soft spot for Green Arrow, Oliver Queen's jump to 1 year later because he became the mayor of the city, and that was just a lot of fun. I think probably for me, I was like really at the time in the thick of the West Wing, and just really loving that I get to do a little political intrigue here and there, and I got to lean in heavily on Ollie's politics, which some people loved and some people hated, and I felt now and again maybe they needed reminding, Green Arrow's always been this kind of pinko liberal. This goes all the way back. I'm not making anything new up, and we're just going to do this, and this is like kind of who he is. And him being the mayor is just nuts. It's fun. It's like we're going to do this. He's a superhero and he's the mayor of the city. So so that was a little more exciting to me. It was just such a big story jump. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I absolutely agree. I do love that jump. In that climactic moment, I remember, again, I like the idea that you leave the character in such peril, and then at least at the moment, you have to have your reader's own imagination kind of figure out, well, how the hell does he survive these two arrows punctured through his body as he's lying there and his city's blown up? I love that type of ending. And that, again, because you jump forward, now, at least at the beginning, the reader just has to kind of, play catch up in their own head, which is a fun little exercise you could do with your reader, which is fun. I thought that was great. And again, I've talked to you before about this. That's why I'm not going too hard on the 1 year later of it all, just because I think we have chatted about this before. But that initial arc, and again, that moment when he takes down Deathstroke and you realize how much of a physical threat he is now, and not just, having a bow and arrow, but actually having trained himself, is still such a great reveal that you and Scott did so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. that was in the back of my head. That I was hoping that during the 1 year later jump that, like, yeah, he's not just Mayor. He's had a year to get a lot better at being a superhero, and I hope to tell that story. And it was fun to tell that in flashback. I think the math and the calendar of it doesn't work out even a little bit. I think at some point people were punching holes in, like, wait, when he was like on the island and getting trained and getting better with this, wasn't he also over here doing this? Like, man, I don't know. Like, it's like, no, I'm sure that it doesn't make any sense at all. But you can't say to your readers, like, yeah, but look, it's just comic books, and we got to tell these stories. And sometimes it, like, it's all make believe, guys. Don't you like them running around on an island in a loincloth, learning how to fight with a sword? I do. Come on now.
We briefly mentioned earlier, but you add new villains to the canvas throughout your run, and obviously the biggest are Brick and Drakon. I'm curious, Dakon, right? Constantine Dakon?
Drakon.
Drakon, yeah. Okay. So
Drakon and Drakon. I swear to you, I'm not saying I don't know the pronunciation. I think both are acceptable. He's Greek. And I think Drakon or Drakon are fine.
Okay. So Constantine, let's call him that.
Constantine.
So what was it like developing that character, and did you think he would kind of take off the way he did? Because it felt like he was definitely a villain that readers really responded to really quickly. I'm not sure exactly why. I think part of it's probably that you wrote him obviously with a great sense of humor, but there's just something to it that he could take these people out, but unless he's being paid to, he doesn't really care. But eventually, kind of a bit of revenge kind of seeps into the character as well. So I'm curious how you initially envisioned the character, what the collaboration was with Phil and Andy about developing the character's visual, and how you felt the character kind of progressed from that original point.
Well, cutting to the end, I loved how much people loved him. I mean, it's one of those things. You create a character. You don't know how people respond, and the fact that people really liked him a lot, like, oh, great. It gets you more excited about continuing to do the character, which means, like, you're getting a response, like, oh, they love it, I love it, we're in, let's do it. So a fun bit of I don't know if I've talked about this ever, but a fun bit of background on Drakon. So Constantine Drakon, I envisioned him as being small, kind of thin, kind of wiry. And I threw it to Phil that I said, I kind of want him to look like Jim Mahfood. So this is comic artist and writer Jim Mahfood, who we know for like years. Mm-hmm. I said, I want him to look kind of like Jim. And he's like, okay, this will be so much fun. And he came back and he's like, oh, shit, that's great. It looks like Jim. It did. It looked like Jim Mahfood. And what I wanted is that, I mean, if you knew Jim is small and very slight, and I like the idea, but Jim was also like wiry as hell. Like he looked like not buff, like just he looked really strong and wiry. I kind of wanted that for this character, and Phil immediately nailed it, the physicality of it. And then it was like, yeah, we're gonna, I want to put him in a suit, he'll wear glasses. Phil got the idea that we'll never see his pupils. It like makes him creepier. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like a mask. You don't ever see his eyes. So he has a Batman-like quality in that way. And then after that, a lot of it's just about the language of the action, about how he would move. And Phil would just draw him kind of just as light as the ether. Like he's just really very precise, incredibly sure of himself and confident in his movements. And it made him fun. And again, just a blast that people liked him as much as he did. I mean, it was great. It was so cool.
Now, when you introduce a character like Brick, Brick's an interesting one because, again, I have a weird history with Green Arrow, as I mentioned, kind of when I was breeding. So the first Brick I kind of came to know was the one that was drawn by Scott McDaniel. And then going back and then reading it and seeing his original interpretation by Phil, a little bit different, almost more schlubby at times, which I thought was so interesting because I didn't expect it. Because so it was a very interesting kind of overall visual language of the character. So what was the description that you kind of gave to Phil when you guys were developing that character?
I said for Brick, explain that, like, okay, so by birth he's a person of color. That's where he comes from. That's his family, his people. But but he's going to look literally like his skin is all rocky, built like somewhere between like Kingpin and the Hulk, and with long white dreads. And I said, and his name is Brick. So that's what we're going for. And then Phil came back with a bunch of sketches, and it was just spot on. It's just, this man mountain who just, and it just worked. And when the script started coming in, and humble brag, Phil was so excited about Brick, I remember, that he thought like this is one of the best characters we've done, maybe that I've done. Like, just love the look and feel of it. We were just really humming. And as the stories went on, again, it's another one who we dug doing and people dug having them. And it was kind of neat. Again, it's like, we're just people. And when you put the books out and we write the scripts and do the stories 3 months before they hit the stands, 4 months in some cases. So that's how far down the road we are with the stories. But when the stories start to come out and people dig them, we get fuel too. We get excited about it. Like, oh, okay, people like Brick. He's going to stick around. But that was another one. I mean, it's odd that you picked these two. Those are the ones that really got very excited about doing.
Mm-hmm. A character that you use a fair bit in the first year and a half, or I guess 2 years, is the Riddler, which, again, not typically a Green Arrow villain. And so a couple questions about using the Riddler. First of all, is it a pain in the ass, or is it fun to come up with including as many riddles as possible, first of all? Because sometimes he's just using them. He's not even it's not even the middle of a caper. He's just spouting off riddles just to kind of mess with people. So is that fun, or is that a bit of a pain in the butt?
In theory, before you're doing it, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's before I was actually doing it, I'm thinking about all right, he's the Riddler. It's got to be lots and lots of riddles. That's irritating. And then you get into it and you kind of find your rhythm. Everyone has their own rhythm about how to make the Riddler the Riddler. And he was, at the time, not really being... That was the thing that I could share. Is he going to be in Batman? Bob. Is he going to be in Batman? No, we're not using him. Great, I'll use the Riddler. So 6 issues with the Riddler. And the Riddler, what's fun about the Riddler as a character is that he's kind of top shelf in recognition. So when you turn a corner and it winds up being the Riddler, people are like, oh, shit, it's Riddler. Mm-hmm. It's helpful. You don't have to create a whole new villain. And that's the fun about having, you get to rummage through the toy box and go, can I use this one? I can? Great, thank you. And the Riddler's part of it. And then you get to dig into what makes it interesting as a character and a story and to build out from that. And for me, I decided that Ollie just hates him. Just sees him more as just this nut job pain in the ass. And just, doesn't have any fear or even grudging respect for him at all, and that made it kind of interesting. They thinks he's a hack. Mm-hmm. That he's just some guy playing dress up. But that was his take on him. He might not have been right, but that's what Ollie thought, and that's how he treated him.
Well, it's interesting because you have two arcs with the Riddler, and I'd say in the first arc it does kind of fit more that mold because he's not the end boss there, right? He's doing something, but it ends up being just a gateway to another story, which is a much bigger story and again leads to a big watershed moment for Mia. When you bring back the Riddler, though, he's much more unhinged and much more violent than I think probably most people are used to seeing him, almost taking a page out of the Joker's book in terms of just wailing on both Arsenal and on Ollie. So was there any pushback from the Bat Office about how brutal, because again, he's usually more of a cerebral villain, and you have him just laying into these two guys. They're all just humans there. There's no metahumans in the bunch. There's just 3 humans, right. And he's just wailing on them. Was there any pushback about that?
No, because again, I was lucky enough to be there at the buffet. Riddler had a bit of a fun shift around that time in the Bat group, in the Bat books. They wanted him to kind of level up and not be a joke. So I got to get in there on the early side when they were doing that, and that's when I was like, oh, can I bring him back to Green Arrow? Because Green Arrow really treated him like a chump. He really just just took him apart. And it'd be interesting for him to be really pissed and wanting a bit of revenge now that he seems to have found a whole new lane. They found a new gear. And so everyone's like, oh, no, cool. I mean, the Bat group was happy. He's like, cool, that solidifies our leveling up a Riddler. Let's do it, man. Go. So it is one of those things where, again, in hindsight, you don't get to see the whole thing laid out month to month because you're not reading you're not reading 25 monthlies when they're coming off the shelves. You're looking at, you, Adam, you're reading the trades and, not seeing how the entire board was already set, and including, those with their ear to the ground as far as reading the comics that, we're doing a crap ton of interviews where we talk about things like, oh, no, this is the year of the Riddler. We're up in his game, and people are talking about him. He'll be in Batman. He'll be showing up in Green Arrow. We'll see him elsewhere. Like, Riddler's no joke anymore. And then it gets to be rolled out as like this badass Riddler. So if I'm remembering it right, and I might not be, I think that was a huge part of it. And again, it was one of those things where it's fun, where we've changed up this toy, we changed up this character, and you get to mess with him. So have at it.
Mm-hmm. Last kind of topic before I let you go, and it's a big one, but we don't have to spend a lot of time on it necessarily, but I'm just curious about, you talked about how you couldn't do certain things in theory with Robin that you could do with Mia. You had Mia come out as HIV positive, so you have a lot of important storylines happening with Mia and this kind of crucible to create the new Speedy. Did you know when you took over the book that you were definitely going to push her in the Speedy direction? Did it just kind of evolve? And how delicate did you at times have to be with the character, or were they pretty, forthright in terms of what you could say? And I say that because reading it now, I'm reading through Green Arrow and it's great, but then you have moments where she's talking about being raped and you're like, okay, well now it's a bit more of an adult book, and this is, so part of the book I'm like, oh, my son could read this, and I'm like, oh no, maybe I don't want him to read this part. So right. How many conversations were there about kind of using the character and being that direct? I mean, obviously Kevin Smith had already introduced the character in a specific way, so it's not like you're adding something that wasn't already there, but maybe you're speaking the quiet parts out loud a little bit. Was there any pushback at the time, or was there any recognition at the time that you were taking this kind of character and really saying something, and also you have the character not... Actually, sorry, I apologize. I'm asking a question and it's saying too much, but I will say one thing I really liked about how you have her coming, kind of owning it, is that when she's giving the kind of the talk at the school and she's saying, like, I'm living with this. And so, and obviously this is an important subject to you because of Pedro. So I'm curious what kind of led you to kind of using Mia and a more mainstream comic to talk about this in a very frank and honest way.
Well, again, to begin at the end, we're talking about Mia Durden, who would become Speedy. Both Oliver Queen's, we'll just say, adopted daughter. Mm-hmm. Ward. I mean, was that expression we use anymore when it first started, and then his sidekick, as it were, his partner, when she became Speedy. I got no pushback. This was something that was talked about, and everyone was on board from the word one, from word one on it. Absolutely. But as far as the genesis of Mia testing HIV positive, I had actually always thought that this was a direction that Kevin Smith was going to take the character. When Mia was introduced in his run, she was a teenage sex worker, is the most up-to-date way of putting it. And what I mean by up-to-date is that this story is 20 years ago, and some of the ways we the collective, we would have probably told the story now is different. I think we have a little more sensitivity towards everything on everything. It's maybe just a little bit too harsh that she was a sex worker when she came into this. I think you could have gotten the job done with just her being homeless or having run away from home for any number of reasons or whatnot, but it was rough. It was rough. Mm-hmm. I had naturally thought that she would test positive because she was a sex worker at a time when, that it would make sense that she would probably contract HIV. I know Kevin Smith had toyed with the idea of her becoming Speedy, but the reader sniffed it out from the moment she showed up that she would become Speedy, and they made a point, like, in this day and age, Oliver Queen wouldn't bring a teenager onto the streets with him. It's too dangerous. He wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. Not now, not today, not with our standards today. And so Kevin balked on the idea. He thought they were right. So even before he got there, again, we work ahead. So before he got there, he decided to jettison the idea, like, no, okay, she won't become Speedy. So when I came on board, I had that idea in my head, like, I thought she would test positive. And I think she could become Speedy because of it. That's what worked for me in both cases, that I think she should become a superhero because this is what she wants to do, and she wants to do this because she feels, she's not necessarily right. She feels that she might be living on borrowed time, which is kind of an overcorrection that, you know, I even knew at the time. It's like, well, she'll get on combination drug therapy. She could live a long and healthy life, but she might not, and that's what she's living with. So I brought up that idea to Bob. Bob loved it. We were going to do it. He threw it to Dan. Dan was on board immediately. Went to Paul Levitz, who was on board immediately, and everyone was reading over my shoulder a little more than usual, paying closer attention because they knew it was a sensitive subject, and they wanted it to be a story that people noticed too. So also making sure that all the folks in PR were going to get it out there too, and we had stories written about it and things like that. But for me personally, I had a teenager who was testing positive for HIV, which is exactly something that was a story that I was familiar with because of my friendship with Pedro Zamora when I was on The Real World. And I'd written a whole book about Pedro. And a lot of what Mia was saying were really words out of Pedro's mouth. Things that he wished someone had said to him when he was a young person. So that was a huge part of it. It all kind of came together in a very, very neat package in that way. That I thought this was a story that was going to happen. As I entertained the idea of doing it, it allowed me to turn her into a superhero. And how strongly everyone responded. Really responded well. Both most of the readers, everyone at DC, everyone who worked on the books especially. You know, both Phil and Andy were terrific and really crafted a beautiful story with a lot of drama and sensitivity. Really, I mean, artists often don't give enough credit for the acting they have to put into the characters, and it was beautiful in that way.
Absolutely, and it's interesting because it took relatively, three almost 4 years of publishing time since she had been introduced. By the time she becomes Speedy, it does feel much more natural. And I think there's lots less pushback or a lot less of, well, why would Ollie let someone do that? Because you actively have Ollie trying to stop her for like a year. Like just being like, you can't do this. Please don't do this.
Right.
And she's like, I'm living with you guys. I'm exposed to this anyway. I'm training with Connor. Like, why wouldn't you let me do this? And it's interesting because you can see both sides, but because we almost forget that she's 16 because, not everyone always looks 16 on the page, but like obviously you're reinforcing it in the dialogue, and it's interesting. Like you're like, well, why wouldn't you let her? She's obviously been training. Like it's she's not like any other kid, but it feels much more earned as a result. So when she does become Speedy, it does feel much more of like a moment and not a, oh well, I guess we're just going to have another one of these. Like it does feel very earned.
Yeah, it doesn't really do the movie of the week thing because we've been laying all that track. And it was the benefit of knowing that down the road I'm going to do this. So, and I liked her as a character. She was like a wonderful presence. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I got to do those things where like, yeah, it made for a good story to have her in there knocking around with Connor and like training and having those fights with Ollie. Like that she wants to go out there and wants to do this, and he gets to do the bullshit. I'm no way, absolutely not. Basically, I was really just taking a page out of what Kevin Smith had already written in that way. That he figured it out. Like, yeah, Ollie wouldn't let her. That makes great sense. So we need a reason, and this story gave us the reason. And again, it wasn't. I test positive, now I can run around and shoot out. I was like, no, man, she's been doing this for a little while, and now I'm not going to stand it. Oliver Queen says I'm not going to stand in her way. This is what she wants. This is what she needs. And who am I to deprive her of that? He slaps on the costume too. Mm-hmm. And the answer of her being too young, she got the fire back. I don't know how much time I have, and this is how I want to spend it. You're going to deprive me of that.
Mm. I promised to let you go, but I do have one more question because I didn't really ask about him at all. But
it's all good.
But we've danced around him. You have this great secondary lead in Connor because you use him so judiciously. He's in many, like most of the issues. He's basically a co-lead, but you play him so gently, and it felt like you really had a fun time with kind of keeping him restrained, because you had Ollie, who's this larger than life, blowhard at times. Everything he feels is so big, and so you have this guy who's much more restrained, kind of keeps it all in. So I'm curious how much fun it was to kind of play that dynamic between them, and also have the dynamic between Connor and Roy whenever Rory would show up, because again, they're so different, but they're both like their dad in different ways.
Yeah, Connor was just a perfect fit because he's nothing like Ollie.
Mm-hmm.
He's reserved. He's even a little nerdy in that way. Like he's a little uptight, and uptight is kind of fun to write, especially with bigger personalities around.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that he's self-assured enough that he's a superhero, so he can take shit from Ollie and Mia, and still not be cowed or like not be self-conscious or anything like that. It made for a very interesting dynamic, from Oliver Queen to Mia to Connor, and then Roy shows up, and Roy's he's like mini Ollie,
mm-hmm.
and in a lot of ways, but wants to be his own man. It's just like he's just bigger in every way. Roy, I was gonna say he dates. Roy is sexually active. Mm-hmm. He gets out in the world. He's just a bigger personality. And Connor was fun. I liked how, exactly as you said, he's just really more reserved. He's Buddhist, and it's important to him, and he's thoughtful, and he thinks. He's not spontaneous the way everyone else is.
Mm-hmm.
He's contemplative, and having him a part of the family more and more it was fun to write. It was fun to craft the character. And again, I liked how people took to him. They got it. They got Connor. They understood him. It was fun.
I will say, when you write Roy, well, first of all, I think my favorite version of Roy is your version of Roy from Outsiders. It was just such a great interpretation of the character, having him kind of try to take the lead, but also having all these flaws. And what eventually happens between him and Deathstroke is fantastic at the, spoilers, I guess, for a very old story, but is a kind of a great moment as well at the kind of end of that run. So I always really appreciate how you wrote Rory, because that was kind of, again, my main entry point to Rory was Outsiders, and I've always kind of held it up as probably my favorite version of him, because he was his own man, as you say, but still in the shadow of Ollie, but not always feeling it in the same way. Whereas later on, when he becomes Red Arrow, it's different, and he, which I guess is by Brad too, actually, now that I think about it. And it feels like he's kind of putting aside this rebellious nature of trying to not be like Ollie, and instead embracing what the good parts of what Ollie were. Whereas your version was still more the rebellious type that I really liked, but him just trying to strike on his own is doing his own thing.
Yeah, I liked how. Well, there's there's the father-son aspect. There's the hero and mentor aspect, and Rosie has a different relationship with each of them. But Batman's Batman. He's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a lot of love there, which is Oliver Queen, kind of gregarious. He's he's not a hugger, man, but he'll definitely hug you, and he'll box you ears, and he'll knock around you he's a guy, and you know what, Roy did that, and that's how Roy was raised, and that's him. But yeah, you're right. The way we were crafting him was Green Arrow is never that far away from him, and he wants very much to be a little bit like Dick Grayson, to be Nightwing, to be well, not even to be like Oliver Queen, to be guys. And that was an ongoing issue, and fun to write in that way.
Absolutely. Well, Judd, thank you so much for taking so much of your time today to talk about something you worked on 20 years ago. It is a fantastic run of comics. People should definitely go back and, find your Green Arrow run, read it on DC Infinite, do whatever they got to do. It's well worth the journey and the ride. You put so much time and effort into it over the years and had quite a substantial run. So there's a lot for people to sink their teeth into. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it.
Well, thank you, sir. It was Well, before my Hilo series, it was the most work I had put on one single story, if you will. So I was, thankfully, when I finished up, it was with a bit of regret, but at the same time, that's when I'm feeling like, okay, so it's time. It's time. I don't know if I have anything left to say or do with this character. It's been, it had been like 5 years. Mm-hmm. That's a long time. It's a lot of comics and a lot of variations. And it's like, okay, I was okay with letting go with it. I do miss it and think about it a lot. I think about the character a lot. And the character stayed with me in a lot of ways. But thank you. It was fun walking down memory lane here with you. I appreciate. I don't often get to talk about Green Arrow at all. So it was a blast. I appreciate it, Adam. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And again, well, I'm sure I'll have you back on in January or February to talk about the next Hilo, but it was nice to go back to your DC years for a little bit.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.